Hello, this is Andrew Hill. Again, I'm talking about Chapter 4, The Power of Moral Theories, in our book Doing Ethics by Louis Vaughn. This chapter, Chapter 4, introduces a lot of different concepts, but the two main ones we want to focus on the difference between consequentialist theories and non-consequentialist theories. This big divide between these two theories helps set up Chapters 5 and 6 that follow. Chapter 5 talking about consequentialist theories, and Chapter 6 talking about non-consequentialist theories. So let's just start at the beginning. A consequentialist theory is one that says that what makes an action right is its consequences, the outcomes of that. When you're weighing and balancing, you're trying to make a decision, and you're looking at the outcomes, the consequences, and you're trying to weigh, for example, what's the most good for the most people, but it's the outcomes. And then you back up from those consequences to figure out what's the rightness of the action, what's the right thing to do, what's going to be our guide here. Now, of course, non-consequential theories are the exact opposite. They say simply that the rightness of an action does not depend on its consequences. They're going to say that what you need to do is focus on what's the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences. Trying to figure out, is there a rule, is there a principle involved, what's at stake, and then, once you've figured out the right thing to do, then do it. And you have to let the chips fall where they may, as they say, and do the right thing, even though the heavens may fall, which is an expression you hear which says that it's not about the consequences. So there's two very fundamentally different approaches to ethical decision making. And so I just wanted to try to focus in on an example. We've talked in the past about trying to make difficult decisions, and for example, in the war on terror, there was this question about whether or not it was legal or illegal, proper or improper, the right thing to do or not in terms of torturing prisoners, for example, to get information. Now, there's a whole conversation about what constitutes enhanced interrogation techniques and what's torture and what's not. But let's just focus for a minute and say, clearly, if there's going to be torture in a situation where you think that you might be able to extract information from a known terrorist in the middle of a situation, where if you construct a situation where there's going to be a bomb that's going to go off and potentially kill thousands of people, but you're able to get a hold of one of the people who's in on this plot from the beginning, and the question becomes, we need this information to stop this bomb from going off. Is it morally permissible to torture this person to try to get that information? Now, the point here, again, as you see in the chapter, a lot of times you can end up with the same decision, but the thinking behind it can be quite different. But let's say, for example, you make the decision to say, yes, we should torture this person. You get into the reasons why. The reasons are, well, we're trying to save a bunch of people. There's a bomb that's going to go off. Potentially thousands of people could die. When I look at the outcomes, when I look at the consequences of acting versus not acting, torturing versus not torturing, I say, well, yes, it justifies it. If that allows us to get the information we need, stop the bomb, that's a good decision. That's the right course of action. A non-consequentialist might say, no, look, torturing people is always wrong. Even if it gets you the information you need, even if it could prevent this, it's too high a price to pay because there's a rule, and when I apply that principle to this situation, the fact of the matter is, nope, I'm not going to torture this person. For that non-consequentialist thinking and approach and reason. Now the key here, and I want to be clear about this, is those the decisions aren't tied to that type of thinking. You can flip that around. It's the type of thinking we're focusing on. For example, you could have somebody who said, my decision is to torture this person. And the reason is clear, which is that self-defense is an important natural premise. It's a principle which applies to everybody all the time. It's an objective moral principle that applies to everybody. And when I apply that principle to this situation, it says, torture this person. Find out what we need to protect ourselves, protect our family, our children, our innocent folks. And so all of a sudden you can see where you kind of, it flipped there. You ended up with a different decision, but the thinking is kind of the same. And the reverse works again with consequentialist thinking. The focus then is it's on the outcomes for consequentialists and letting that back up and determine the rightness of an action, or applying some principles, some standards, some other thing not related to the outcomes or consequences, and using that as your source, your guide, your touchstone for what's the right thing to do in this situation. That basic distinction between consequentialism and a focus on the outcomes versus non-consequentialist thinking, which is focused just on the act itself. What's the right thing to do or not? And the consequences don't matter. We won't even look at them. We know they're out there. It's not that we're ignoring them or somehow acting without paying attention to the consequences. We know they're there, but we're not going to let those determine our actions or the rightness of what's the choice in front of us. That we're going to pick up for the first time in chapter 4, and it gets developed in 5 and in 6 in much greater detail as we look at a number of different types of theories under each of those two broad categories. So again, today we're going to stop with just those two major theories, consequentialism and non-consequentialism, as an introduction to 4, into what we'll get more of in chapters 5 and 6. Thanks.